I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today my guest is Reverend Gayle Dillon, who is the founding minister and spiritual leader of the Everyday Center for Spiritual Living here in Santa Fe. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you finally.
Yeah, glad
we
to
may
be
even
here.
get around to talk about what that finally meant. Anyway, today's prophetic topic is real short. Leap and the net will appear, and we'll talk about that definitely. Today's prophetic topic is a quotation attributed to the naturalist John Burroughs. So let's start with you.
All right.
Tell us your story. How did you become a minister?
Wow, how did I become a minister? I felt lost. I had spent most of my life doing drugs, drinking alcohol, unhappy, kind of caught up in victimhood, and got this message one day that was clear that if I didn't change my life, nothing was going to change. And so 9 years ago, I walked into a Center for Spiritual Living and just knew the minute I walked in that that was where I needed to be, and I started volunteering and taking classes, and it really did change my life. And 6 weeks into attending, I decided to quit drinking, quit using drugs, and quit smoking cigarettes. I woke up one morning and just said I was done, and the desire left when I just said, okay, stop.
This voice you had.
Yeah.
Talk about that. What do you attribute that to?
I attribute it to my higher self finally making the connection with, I was open to receive. And so it's one of those things that I think anybody can hear that voice. It's just, are you awake and aware to it? And for me, it took my life absolutely falling apart around me for me to finally get to that place of surrender where I could hear it.
Yeah, how do you feel about the concept that we really, for the most part, have to overcome adversity before we get to a spiritual place?
I don't think that's everybody's path. I think it was mine. I think that some people, sometimes they could be born awake and aware. Some people may choose just to walk a more direct path for whatever reason. Adversity had to get me where I was. It was, I was always at choice not to go that route. But for me, it worked well because it is the person I am today, and it makes me more available, I think, to people because I understand where they've come from.
I've been doing this gig now for about 12 years, 10 years on radio, 2 years on TV. I don't know if I average, 40 shows a year or something. We're talking, maybe like 600 shows or to that neighborhood. All the people I've ever interviewed, I've run into like 3 or 4 people who are really deeply spiritual and started out that way. Now, I didn't know, I asked the question because I resonate with what you're talking about. My viewers know that I'm a recovering addict. Most of the people I meet hit some form of bottom. That they have to, it would, well, let me ask you another question then. Do you feel that the function of ego is to challenge us to become more spiritual?
I think the function of the ego is to stand in our way somehow. It's interesting that you should ask that question because I'm working with a group of, it turns out to be women right now. It wasn't set up as a women's group. It's a mastermind group. And a lot of them have been struggling with the ego, and there's always that perception that we need to get rid of our ego. And I said, why not, instead of getting rid of your ego, you promote it or you start dancing with it instead of thinking of it as an enemy? Because if it's, I believe everything is all God, so God's in your ego. So instead of trying to make it separate or make it bad, take it from standing in front of you, stopping from doing what you're here to do, and saying, you know what, you've done such a good job, be my cheerleader and stand behind me and walk with me on this path. So
I don't think it's bad. I just think it's here to, it does its job perfectly. I agree, God created it, and it's our adversary. You know, I've used the example that if I was a world-class tennis player, I wouldn't get better beating up on high school or college tennis players. I'd have to play people who are equal or better than me to improve my game, and I really think that's what ego does. You know, because you talk about that voice, and we're going to get way off track here, but
I bet that happens a lot.
it does. It's like, there were all those times where there was this voice that said, Phil, don't go there. And as soon as that voice got finished saying there, the other voice jumped in and convinced me to do it. And then at the end, when the mess had hit the fan, it was like, why didn't I listen to that voice?
Ah, the 2x4. I call it the 2x4.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, so, and I think we got to get to a place where we're really ready to listen to what you called your higher self, to hear that voice come through us and say, yeah, how is this really working for you? How much pain and suffering do you want to have?
And I think that what I have learned recently, especially now that I have a center, and so I get to see people on all different kinds of paths, is that you can stand and deliver a message, and then you have to be free enough to be unattached and let people walk that path, even though it looks like they're following right down your footsteps and you're thinking, oh, don't go there. But sometimes they have to, because they need to go, you know, they need to be hit by the 2x4.
Yeah.
And if I knock them off their path before they get to where they want to go, they may stop, but they'll find that same path again, and they'll end up. They have to finish it the way they need to finish it. So
I agree, totally. So you walked into religious science.
I did, fortunately.
Was that the first experience you ever had with religious science?
Yes, it was, and I found them on the internet.
What were you looking for?
It's an interesting story. I had heard the voice. I had a bookstore behind my house. So I walked into the bookstore, and these ladies were doing readings, and they had spiritual books, and they handed me a book and said, take this home and read it and, you know, see if it speaks to you. And I read the book, and I went back, and it was about becoming a witch. And the whole thing that I heard at that time was I could not go home and say to my parents, after everything I'd put them through, guess what, I'm going to be a witch. And so
Stop being an alcoholic and a drug addict, I became a witch.
And so I took it back and I said to him, I really love this message, but there's just some things that don't sit well with me personally. What do you suggest? And so they suggested a place that had outside services, very spiritual. I looked it up and they'd closed, and from there I found the link to religious science. And so there were 2 centers in Seattle. I found one, fortunately, on the east side, and I say fortunately because there were only 75 people at the time going to church there, so I couldn't get lost. I went in, they knew I was new. They made me feel welcome. If I hadn't come on a Sunday, they would have called and said, where were you? And it was that kind of support that my higher self knew I needed. And so I ended up exactly where I needed to be, and that's where I met my husband.
So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, you're carrying the message now of religious science. What is the message?
The message to me, what I try to convey to people every Sunday is that, and I learned this from Reverend Susie Shadle, who is my mentor, is, the good news is you're responsible for your life, and the bad news is you're responsible for your life. And so it's really being aware that you're always at choice. Every single day, everything that is presented to you, you get to go left, you get to go right. I tell people, you wake up in the morning, you're at choice the minute you open your eyes. Do you get out of bed? Do you stay in bed? And so it's all about choice, and are you going to take time to listen and make choices that are life-affirming?
What are we listening to, and how do we know they're life-affirming? I mean, there was a voice that told me for a good number of years that everything I was doing, whatever I could get my hands on, was life-affirming. You may not be old enough for this, but do you remember when the accent, the flavor enhancer, it was monosodium glutamate, and they packaged it as a thing called accent, and they used to do these commercials where they'd sprinkle accent on a chicken, and the chicken would start squawking. It's like it brings the flavor out of the chicken.
Oh, I do remember that.
Oh, okay. Well, that was my rationalization for drugs. It brings the flavor out of Phil. And so, I mean, how do I discern what's life-affirming?
I think life-affirming to me means if I'm not hurting myself. So I don't know about you, but when I was a drug addict, alcoholic, I was doing damage to my body. Internally, I was doing damage to my emotional self all the time. And so I could have kidded myself it was life-affirming, but it was a quick fix. It made me courageous. It made me self-confident. But there was residual damage or collateral damage all the time. I never used drugs or drank that there wasn't collateral damage. And so I think when you really get that it's life-affirming, there's no collateral damage.
So how does religious science go about teaching this particular approach?
The simplest quote that I grabbed onto was, change your thinking, change your life. And so if there's something in your life that you want to change, then get back to a thought that manifested that into your life and change it at the very core of who you are. And I tell people it sounds simple, and it's not, or everybody would be doing it. It requires you to be engaged. It requires spiritual practices. It requires you a willingness to be willing to change how you show up.
Elaborate on that.
Well, for me, I could have continued to use drugs and been a victim. That was easy. You know, that was easy. It wasn't comfortable, but it was easy. And so for me to stand and say, okay, and I don't know about you, but I'm not going to use drugs and I'm not going to use alcohol. So then what I had to do was deal with all the emotional stuff that came up that I was trying to anesthetize myself from hearing. You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You're too this. You're too that. You're not enough of this. You're not enough of that. And so that's where it takes courage. You have to be able to stand in all of that junk and say, you know what, that's not the truth of who I am, and I'm going to choose differently. And that takes practice, because I call it monkey mind. I had that monkey mind that constantly wanted to tell me, you're not good enough. You're not good enough to go to college. You're not good enough to, make this kind of money. You're not good enough to date this kind of person. And I had to, when I quit using drugs and alcohol, then I had to listen to it and move through it.
Let's go deeper with this. I mean, not so much into the recovery aspect, but
Right.
to the message of religious science. What did it tell you that you put into practical application?
It told me that God is all there is, and if God is all there is, then I'm a manifestation of that in form. And so how could I not be worthy? How could I not be good enough? Because at the essence of who I am, there's God.
How did you see God before this?
I didn't.
So,
And I will tell people that God was always there. It was me who was not seeing it. It's not like all of a sudden, because I started to believe, there was a switch that came on and there was God. God was always there, because if I believe God is in everything, then it is in everything. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever I want to call it, there it is. And it's just an awakening within me to how much am I going to express that. And so I had to let go of all of my former beliefs about myself and step into that Marianne Williamson's comment about we don't fear, we fear our greatness is what we
Yeah.
fear. You know, our biggest fear is not playing small. Our biggest fear
Just
is
being
playing
large,
big.
yes.
Yeah. And so that's what this has taught me, is to step into that and be okay with it.
Okay. We'll come back to that, but let's do a little history.
Okay.
Religious science. Talk about how it came into being and all that kind of good stuff.
Ernest Holmes is the founder of religious science. He grew up on the East Coast, Maine, I believe, and he was an avid reader, and he had parents that taught him he could do anything, be anybody he wanted. You know, there were no limits. So he grew up with that. You talk about some people are just born being spiritual. Maybe he was fortunate to be born into a family that encouraged him to seek. He dropped out of high school and moved to California and started, he just read, and what he read and what he understood was that all philosophies believe the same thing, that there is one supreme being. And so his thing wasn't a matter of which path was right. His thing was all paths lead to God, so do whatever is right with you. And it works for me because he gave me the freedom to study all different kinds of religions and be who I wanted to be within this philosophy.
That's what he did, was study all kinds of religions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when I said I didn't feel I was good enough to go to school, what part of becoming a minister was going to the Holmes Institute and getting a master's degree in consciousness studies. And so I had to go to school for 4 years, and I had to prove to myself that I was a good student, which I had always known I was. And so, and you study all the different religions because we read and studied what he read and studied.
So let's roll that into, you have a congregation.
I do.
And somebody's going to show up there for the first time. What kind of experience are they going to have? Besides a pleasant one, of course.
We're pretty rocking. We tell people that the first thing I say to them is, welcome to Everyday Center for Spiritual Living. We are empowering people to live joy-filled lives. Because just imagine what the world would be like if everybody was filled with joy. And so we have, I don't know if you remember the song by Sly and the Family Stone.
We are family.
No, I Am Everyday People.
Everyday People, okay.
We play that. That's our opening song. That's how we open. And everybody gets up and moves, because to me the expression of the divine is not only through prayer and song, but moving your body and just being that expression. And so it is, we have fun. We have fun, uplifting music. My talk is 20 minutes long max. The service is about an hour long. It's about community.
What does a service look like? Do you use any one particular book, or?
I have been using The Science of Mind, our philosophical book. I'm going to switch over now and do the next 12 weeks, starting in June. It's the 12 Steps to Enlightenment. And it's based on faith and hope and encouragement, and so it's whatever speaks to me in the moment.
So then that sets up maybe a situation where the congregation is in the religious science much more reflective of the minister than any other place.
It's possible. It's possible because in the philosophy we believe that you create your own reality. So if I am filled with joy, then people will come and they will want to be filled with joy, they will be filled with joy, or probably this congregation will not speak to them. So in that respect, you're probably absolutely right. It's not that they have to come in and necessarily be in that place of a joy-filled life, but because I wasn't when I walked in, but they realize when they walk in, they want something to change in their life.
And they're not going to necessarily study the Bible or the Upanishads? I mean, it's
Could be,
open.
it's open. I quote the Bible probably more frequently than I quote other religious texts because it's something that I'm more familiar with, and I don't study the Bible. It's just out of all of them, it's the one I'm most familiar with. But I do quote other scholars also from different religions. So.
And then every minister who has their own congregation also has that leeway.
Yep. Yeah, we all follow the same philosophy, and we all get to be individuals within that philosophy. So you could go to any religious science center and have a same experience, and yet within that experience it could be entirely different. What I think when you walk into any community is you're going to feel the love and the acceptance, because every center teaches that it's all God and it's all love. That would be the core belief, and that would be the experience, and then how that's expressed through each community would be different just depending on who shows up.
Interesting. So it's really, which is, in my mind, a positive comment, it's void of dogma and ritual.
Definitely.
Good.
I mean, we have, I'm not going to say void of ritual. I like ritual. Void of dogma. We do a candle lighting ceremony that I say is ritual at the end. But there's some centers that don't do that. So, each center is individual.
Beautiful. When we get towards the end, we'll give you a chance to just tell them where you are, when you are, because I know we're just flashing some contact information,
Okay.
but you'll let them know when services are and everything. So besides Ernest Holmes, what else influenced you?
Wow.
We got all day. It's okay.
Let me think. What else influenced me? I like a lot of contemporary writers. I like Deepak Chopra. I like Wayne Dyer. I love Edwin Gaines, who happens to be a Unity minister. I like Don Miguel Ruiz. I like reading the Upanishads. It takes me a little bit longer because of the languaging of it.
Yes.
So almost anything that has a spiritual message. I don't know if you've ever read any Robin Sharma, but his are more stories. But within the story, he weaves a lot of spiritual truths, and so I love reading his books.
How much of this is projected out into your ministry? All of it? None of it? Some of it?
Probably 90% of it, I think.
Okay.
I don't know about all of it, maybe all of it. I tend to be a what you see, what you get. So, and I explain that to the people that come on Sunday, that there's a lot of people who become ministers that feel, okay, I'm going to be a minister on Sunday, and then over here I'm going to be somebody else. And what I have told people is, I can't do that. And so I love to watch football and baseball, and I get pretty wound up in the sport, and I can yell and scream at the TV. And so if you don't want to see your minister yell and scream during a football game, then probably don't sit and watch football with me, because I can't not be who I am.
Yeah, who else can we be?
Exactly.
We tried that. It didn't work.
It didn't work, exactly. We had practice.
How do people react to your background?
I think that I haven't had a lot of people come and talk to me directly about it. I'm very open and honest about it. I don't hide it from people. I have had other people say, well, somebody asked me how you got to be a minister considering your background. And I found it interesting that they didn't ask me. I think that those people that are open and realize that your past is your past, that's another thing we teach in this philosophy is, your past can be looked at as a learning tool, but you can't change it. And if you keep looking back, you're living in the past, and it's just going to reoccur in your future. And so I can look at my past, I can share my experiences, but I never go back and live there. Because if I did, I'd start using I'd be in my disease again.
Not a pleasant place to be.
No.
I hear you. So we started the show with the prophetic topic, leap and the net will appear. You want to explain that, why you chose that?
I think what I learned, and I have maybe been this my entire life and just wasn't awake and aware enough to realize it, is that when something's over in my life, it's over. And when I want something in my life, I will go for it. For instance, coming to Santa Fe. When we made the decision to come to Santa Fe, it was when the market had failed. It was when the job market was failing. And so everybody that knew my husband and I was saying, you don't want to go to Santa Fe. It's too expensive. You don't want to go to Santa Fe. It's small. They won't have any job opportunities. And we were like, but we want to go to Santa Fe. And to me, that was the leap. It was, we knew this is where we wanted to be. And so we took the leap. And there were times, and I tell this to my community, there were times that we felt that the floor was coming up pretty fast on us and it looked like we were going to hit and it was going to be ugly. And then that net came up and it was okay. It was having that faith to know whatever it was, we were going to move through it and it was going to be fine. And that's to me what that phrase means is if you don't take the leap, then you're stuck.
But you got to take the leap and believe.
You've got to take yes, you do. Because if you don't, you're not letting go. And so it's that, I always use the analogy of the people that do the acrobats, that swinging out to catch the next bar. And if they're not willing to let go of the bar behind them, then they're pretty much just hanging suspended in air. So they can either go back to where they were, let go, and know that the net's going to appear, or they're stuck. And there are a lot of people who get stuck, and I think it's fear. And it's faith is what makes the net appear.
There was a gentleman who, don't want to get too deep into it, but said there's only two basic emotions, fear and love. And that faith is a demonstration of that belief in the love. Mm-hmm. Sounds a lot like what you're talking about. Sounds a lot like what Ernest Holmes was teaching.
Exactly.
So, is there also a healing component to the teachings?
Absolutely, because what we believe is we never deny a condition. What we deny is a condition has to continue. So we don't believe at the core of who we are that there's anything to heal, that what we experience on the human level is is where we think the healing needs to be done. And so it is getting back into that truth of who and what we are. So for me, I had somebody ask me one time, well, if you're a religious scientist, why didn't you just pray that you could consume alcohol and you wouldn't be alcoholic? And I said, because alcohol and drugs, for me, I don't like the taste of alcohol. I drank it for an effect. And so what happened when I said I'm done was immediately the desire to drink or to use drug, I let go of. And to me, that was the healing on the human level.
So we get to create our own reality by our beliefs.
Right.
Do we have to believe 100%? Do we have to believe 51%? Is there anything in the teachings of Ernest Holmes that addresses that?
Well, first of all, it's interesting when you really look at what you believe, is understanding that a lot of our beliefs were plugged into us. They're our parents' beliefs, our grandparents' beliefs, our teachers' beliefs. And so what we do is, first of all, look at a belief and say, okay, do I own it? Is it something that I truly want to believe in myself, or was it something that somebody told me and then I decided I believed in it, and is it still working for me? So you can change a belief at any time.
Can you?
Well, sure. I believe you can.
I do too. I think what I'm trying to say is that some of these things are so ingrained that it's not a spontaneous change of belief, especially, I agree with you. I have no desire to use anymore. I've
Right.
had experiences that so surpass anything I ever got out of drugs that I wouldn't want to give them up and go back,
Right.
you know. But there are a lot of people who are not in that total self-destructive kind of suicide on the installment plan. And those beliefs are just so ingrained, and then they're just part of their everyday life.
And I think that, you know, so back to your question, do you have to believe 100% or 50% or, and I think it's up to the individual, and is the belief working for you? Do you want to give it up? And if you want to give it up, then you need to replace it with something else. And so for me, it was, I had a belief that I was unworthy. I believed it. I can't remember when I didn't believe it. And I believed it 100%. And I don't think it was working for me, but I was comfortable with the belief. So when I got clean and sober, and when I got to look at feeling unworthy, not even knowing where it came from or why I felt that way, but how it was preventing me from being that, like we said, the biggest fear, do I want to be great? So then it was, okay, so how do I work on getting rid of that belief? And it's a process. You're right, because it was ingrained. It was at a cellular level. I almost feel like I was born with the belief. And you've got race consciousness, which is what's the predominant belief of everybody I'm hanging around with. And so for me, it's like I have to create a new belief, and it's practice. And it's not like there aren't some days or a moment in a day where that belief may not pop up and I might not think, oh my God, I'm really not worthy. And then I get to go, so what do I do with that now? I turn it over, because I know it's not the truth. I'm working on the opposite side of that, and I've done what I tell people is, look at how long you've believed something. And I've been clean and sober 9 years. Look at what I've done in 9 years. To me, it's an amazing transition where some people think, wow, 9 years is a long time. Not compared to 50 years of the other. To me, it's like a nanosecond.
That's beautiful. I mean, the reason I asked the question is I think we live in a society, we live in a culture, you know, instant gratification.
Yep.
You know, well, I believe I want it to change like that. I want that burning bush experience.
Right.
And that's not the way it usually works. And that's why I wanted to touch on that, because I think it's so important for people who are in a place in their life where something or a lot of things are not working for them. It's not a spontaneous change. It starts with that belief, and then we have to really just keep reinforcing it and watching out for that. Again, I call it the ego that's going to try to sabotage us and take us.
Right, it's the easy way.
Yeah. So there is no easy way, and it's just about order. You know, I've got to be diligent. I've got to be patient. I've got to be persevering.
You have to stay awake and aware. That's what I tell people. You have to stay awake and aware. Even, I mean, I watch TV, you know, and you have to be awake and aware, because otherwise I can't imagine what was going into my subconscious mind when I was sitting in front of the TV and I was anesthetizing myself, watching, you know, the news or whatever I was watching. And now I watch TV and it's enjoyment, and it's amazing how things I used to watch that I really thought I enjoyed now kind of make me, you know, it has a different effect on me physically.
Were there ever any inklings in childhood that this is where you were headed?
Boy, I wish I could say yes, but I don't know. I don't think so.
Because, you know, it's interesting that one of the things that I had to deal with, there were a number of factors that made me the wonderful addict I became. And one of them was, I call it a gift of perception. But what I was perceiving, what the rest of the world was seeing, were two different things. And I really didn't think I belonged.
Okay, I can go along with that.
And as soon as I got clean, it came right back and said, we've been waiting for you, basically. Now you're going to really put us to use. You know,
Oh, no, see, I hadn't looked at my life. I will tell people, in fact, I shared it with my community, I don't ever remember feeling like I belonged or really feeling happy, ever, until the last 9 years. And I will tell them, and now I can stand in front of you and say, I'm just full of joy all the time. And so, I guess that could be, I'd never really connected the two.
it was just, it's been an interesting journey, and I don't want to get into my journey. This is your show. One of the things we've been kind of talking the language, but not speaking to directly, is 12 steps. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of that in the responses that you've been given. So that's been part of your spiritual path as well, I take it.
It has been. It was interesting. I had an opportunity to get clean and sober when I was about 40. I went into a 12-step program because it was mandated. And
nudge from the judge?
Notes from the judge. Yeah, that's what it was. It was either that or prison. And so I decided to go into a 12-step program, and I stayed in it for about 4 years, but I was not dealing with what my core beliefs were. And so for me, all that had happened was the drugs and alcohol got removed, but the personality was still there. And so I went back out, and I went back out for probably about 10 years, but that seed was planted. I don't know if, when I went into treatment, what they said to me was, you're going to go into treatment, you're going to go into AA meetings, and you may go back out, but what you're going to find out is somewhere in your subconscious mind, all of this, the groundwork has been laid for you. And when I went back out, I didn't think about it. When I was using, I didn't think about it. I got clean and sober, and I'd been clean and sober for about 7 years. And one day, an incident happened in my life, and I thought, you get yourself to a meeting. Because there are some things where you need to sit in a room with other alcoholics, because there's just that common language that they understand.
It's interesting because, I think, again, that instant gratification that addicts and alcoholics show up with gets in the way of the recovery. Mm-hmm. Because it really takes the work that we've been talking about to get anywhere, other than just being substance free.
Right.
And the first 2 years of my life in recovery were absolutely the worst years of my life. Because everything I had run from was coming back to the surface, and I had nothing to anesthetize with.
Exactly.
And I don't know how I survived that. I'm surprised sometimes anybody survives that. I had trust issues, so I wasn't going to turn to somebody. I had to really be desperate to, I was desperate when I was using. I didn't care who I got what from. I didn't even ask them what it was. I'll just take it. But when I had somebody who was willing to help me, I wouldn't trust them.
Right.
And it was just like, I don't know how I survived that. I don't know how people survive that. It's like you find alternate dissociative behaviors.
And I think that's probably why this time, because that's what happened to me for the first time I got clean and sober for 4 years, was it didn't work for me because I didn't understand a higher power. I didn't, they said fake it till you make it, and that didn't work for me.
I've been faking it my whole life.
Yeah, exactly. What does that actually look like? How is that different? And so this time what happened was when I walked into a religious science church, as it turned out, my minister was in the program. What are the odds that would happen? And so I just came at it a different way. I found the spiritual base first, and then I knew when I needed to walk into a room, then I could walk in, and I could not only be of service, but I could relax into what the program had to offer instead of pushing back on it.
There was this friend of mine, she's moved away a few years ago. She was one of those old-time hardcore AA type people. And she always used to say what they taught her when she first came in is keep trying churches till you find one you don't want to throw up in, then keep going back to that one for a while.
See, and I wasn't told that. Maybe that would have worked had I done that the first 4 years.
I mean, I think what I'm trying to get to is what we started talking about. We need that spirit to heal.
Right.
You know, and if we don't have the spirit to heal, we're just going to find alternative behaviors or go back to the old behaviors or mix and match them, but we're not going to get any happier. We're not going to get functional.
Right. And I think that with what I have noticed with a lot of people is drama and chaos are kind of the new drug of choice.
New.
Or just, I became awake and aware to the fact that, wow, people really like that. And that's because they are in some way, I don't know if you want to call it fighting, but I think that they're, you know, if we believe God is in everything, and I know that, you know, you and I had talked before this, that you believe that also. If it is in everything, that it's even in that chaos and drama. And it's how they're choosing, how their higher self is choosing to wake them up.
And that becomes then the power, one of the powers we have to create our own reality is the perception of the events around us.
Exactly.
How do I define them?
And do I choose to, you know, Gary Simmons wrote a book called The Eye of the Storm. Do I choose to, amongst all the chaos, amongst all the drama, do I choose to stand there and not engage? And can I just be the center of that storm? And it's, what I have found is that takes a lot of practice.
Yes. I have a poster in my office. Serenity is not freedom from the storm, it's peace while in it.
There you go. Perfect.
It was given to me as a gift from somebody in 12-step.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, but it's exactly what, I mean, withdrawing the stimulus doesn't mean I'm healed. Avoiding the stimulus does not mean I'm healed.
Yeah, it means can I be a place where that light and just shine brighter.
So religious science teaches us how to tap in and help that process grow within us.
Right. We all have that light, and so it's just, you know, I tell people every breath, just imagine like you're blowing on a campfire and you want to expand it. So just imagine that every breath you're breathing in is that breath, that energy that is, and I tell them, you don't have to call it God, call it anything. Call it energy. But imagine that you're breathing it in, and as you are, you're just lighting up. And you're just releasing all that goodness that's already existent within you.
Why the term, the name religious science? Where's this? What does the science imply in this context? Because I'm hearing a whole lot of real ancient spirituality, which, you know, at least as far back as, you know, the Upanishads and their roots was considered a science. It wasn't considered a religion.
Right.
So is that the connection? Or
that is the connection. And he believes now with, boy, and the term has dropped out of my mind. There is, there is a science, and I'm not going to think of the name of it now, I'm sorry, that says that, you know, it is being proven that everything is energy and that we attract based on the energy that we put out. And so it is, Ernest Holmes always believed that religion and science were actually one, that we were going to come back to that place of the ancients, instead of it being religion has to be over here and science has to be over here and one proving the other wrong or whatever, that they're actually going to come to that place that you're going to realize that it's all actually the same thing.
Yeah, it's like two different practices
going the
same direction.
Right.
Exactly. So you're talking, is the term you're looking for quantum physics?
Yes, thank you.
So that really, I mean, for me, that's nothing more than just another name for karma.
Right.
What I put out there, I bring back to me.
Exactly. Exactly. And so what I tell people is if you want joy in your life, then that starts from within. If you want to see peace in the world, that starts from within. If you want peace in the world and then you're yelling at your neighbor, that reverberates out. And so you need to start and be that center of peace first.
Does religious science talk about techniques for centering? Does it talk about prayer, meditation, yoga, contemplation?
I don't, all
What?
of that except maybe, I don't know that he specifically talked about yoga. Definitely meditation, definitely prayer, which we do affirmative prayer, so there's no beseeching because we don't believe that there's a God of judgment. So it's an affirmative prayer of you stating exactly the reality that you'd like to exist around you, and then standing in that, knowing it will show up. Yoga is a great practice. It's not something that he talked about. I talk about yoga because I think it's a great way to connect body, mind, and spirit.
And that connection is essential to move forward on this path.
Exactly.
So,
and gratitude. I think the simplest thing we forget about is just gratitude. You know, I'll tell people all the time, just say thank you all the time and mean it. And that will reverberate out, and the more gratitude you have, the more things you'll have to be grateful for. So it's karma, quantum physics.
it's the Beatles. In the end, the love we take is equal to the love we make is equal to the love we take. Let's reverse. The love we take is equal to the love we make.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I put out there, I get back.
Exactly. The Beatles, you gotta love them.
So, what we're talking about is, if I'm defining it correctly, more of a way to deal with life than it is to worship a deity.
Exactly. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy on how to live your life day to day and become that expression of what I would call that expression of God manifested in form. Heaven on earth.
Exactly. So you are the head of the congregation. What kind of guidance do you give to the congregation that comes to you? I mean, you're like a counselor to them, I would say. It's more than it's like, I guess what I'm trying to, is there a distinction between being a counselor and being a minister? I mean, you've got a title, Reverend. I have a title, Reverend. Right. But I'm not the guy who runs the congregation and says, go read this and do this thing. It's just, we guide by what, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I do Sunday service, and so my talk is based on, this past Sunday, my talk was based on mental equivalent. And if you want to experience something greater than your life existence right now, then you have to expand your mental equivalent, what you believe is possible. You have to expand that. So I gave some examples of, if you want to experience more abundance in your life, then what does that feel like? What does that look like? I also teach, I also do counseling, but on Sundays it's about experiencing joy, and the message is about giving them little gems, I guess, that they can take with them and practice.
Talk about the counseling.
The counseling is, I like to do groups. So I do masterminding groups. We have a women's group that we do that's all about chanting, because that's another vibration. I do some one-on-one counseling. The one-on-one counseling is basically about giving people tools, because my idea of counseling is not to have you as a client for the rest of our natural lives. My idea is giving you tools, and then you get to choose.
I think it was the Tao Te Ching, one of the chapters in there, which basically says the greatest masters are not the one with the most students. The greatest master is the one who creates the most masters.
Ah, yeah, exactly.
And exactly. I mean,
that's what we're all here for. If we're going to have a better earth, then we want people to be happy.
So it stops becoming a numbers game. It becomes, it's quality over quantity.
Right. Well, and it is that if the universe is abundant, which I believe it is, then there's more than enough of everything for everybody. So there should be no fear around.
Believe.
Pardon?
As long as we believe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got to have that faith.
That's the whole, and finding that faith is the whole key.
Right. And Ernest Holmes, who one of the hooks for me was in his book, Can We Talk to God? And they said to him, so, you think you have the best the next best philosophy for everybody. And he said, it's the next best philosophy for me. What I want is people just to believe in something bigger than themselves. However they do that is good.
Beautiful. I need to make a few announcements.
Okay.
Then we'll come back and allow you to tell people where they can partake of this wonderfulness.
Okay.
And then we'll find something to wrap up with.
All right.
Wow. Okay, so if you're watching Words of the Prophet, this is Reverend Phil, and my guest is Reverend Gayle Dillon, and we're here to carry a message, to hear to the public, and that message is what you've been hearing. We are divine. We get the chance to create our own reality. You may not realize that the reality that you're suffering in is of your creation, and that can be changed. And I know that may sound harsh, but it's really the truth. So with that, I am a spiritual counselor. I am not a congregational minister. Just not my path. If you think that either one of us, there's more than enough suffering to go around, unfortunately. Either one of us can help you. We'd love to. That's what we're here for. I speak for myself. I can't speak for Gayle. My services are on a donation basis, and just come in and talk to me and see if what I teach, what I talk about resonates with you, and we can show you how to take it further and actually change your life. Also, this is public access television, and you, the public, are part of this, so if you weren't there, we wouldn't be here. So I'd love to hear from you, questions, comments. I thank you all who come up and say nice things to me in restaurants and on the street. Those of you who don't want to say nice things to me, please leave me alone. So far that hasn't happened, but anyway, love to hear from you. Let me know if there's something you'd like to be clarified on any of these shows. I can help you with it. I'll put you in touch with people who can. Maybe there's a show that you'd like to see me do on a topic that hasn't been addressed or needs to be readdressed. Or maybe you want to do a show with me. Reach out. Love to talk to you. Love to hear from you. My information's been flashing. It'll roll at the end of the show as well. So let me know what you think and what you feel, and see what we can do together. Tell them where they can find you. And
on Sundays, we are at the Santa Fe Women's Club, which is 1616 Old Pecos Highway. We have a meditation service at 9:30. Our Sunday celebration service starts at 10 a.m. sharp. We start on time. We open, like I said, with I Am Everyday People. So it's uplifting, rocking, joy-filled. They can also check out any of our messages at our website, which I know has been flashing on the bottom of your screen. They can contact me by email, or my phone number is 629-9633.
one more time, a little bit slowly.
629-9633.
Okay. I had somebody call me up the other day and just say, the number's flashing on the screen and going by too fast. Can you give me this number?
Oh, okay.
That's why I figured I'd slow you down.
That's that East Coast I spend a little time on. I talk fast.
I hear that. So do I sometimes. Let's go back into this whole concept of spirit and healing. Does religious science address, this is something I touched base on another show a few weeks ago, if spirit is, as I believe, an energy. Mm-hmm. So when I'm working on a healing, it's easier for me to heal the less denser parts of me than it is denser parts of me. So it's easier for me to, for instance, overcome a chemical imbalance than it would be for me to heal a bone. Does that get addressed in that it takes different levels of belief or different depths of belief to change some of those dynamics?
He doesn't talk about different levels of belief or depths of belief. What he talks about is, and he quotes it all the time, and it's in the Bible, it is done unto you as you believe. And so I will tell people, if I had that belief as the great Jewish prophet Jesus did, then in a heartbeat I could heal a bone that's broken. It is the race consciousness around me. It is what I have been born into believe, that, there's doctors, there's medicines, and none of that is wrong. Ernest Holmes definitely says in our philosophy that God is in the medicine, God is in the doctors that you go see, and so it's whatever works for the individual.
Okay. So my beliefs become a part of that.
Right.
If I don't believe in the medicine I'm taking, it's probably not going to work.
It won't work, exactly. So like you said, you don't go to Western doctors because you don't believe it's your path. And so if you went, it probably wouldn't work for you because you have no belief in what they're doing. There are other people who absolutely believe that they will take something and it will help them heal, be it a vitamin or anything else, and it will because they have belief in it.
That's, what's his name? The guy who founded the Mind-Body Institute of the Harvard Medical School, Dr. Herbert Benson. He started off his career, he was as an intern, and he was doing a summer on a merchant marine ship. And every time they hit port, they go out and they get drunk, they get into fights, they come back and all tore up, and doctor, you gotta help, because I knew he was a doctor, or going to be a doctor, you gotta help me. And all I had was like aspirin and vitamins, and he would dispense them with this whole ceremony, ritual, and they would all get better. And that started his belief. What they used to call the placebo effect was what he called remembered wellness, which sounds exactly like what
Right.
Dr. Ernest Holmes is talking about.
Right. And so it is whatever you choose.
Whatever we choose. Beautiful. We are about running out of time. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Oh, it was wonderful. And we will do this again sometime.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope you got as much out of it as we would love for you to get out of it. The message in this show, and it's fairly consistent from show to show, we are spiritual beings. We create our own reality. What we believe is manifested in our lives, and there's nothing beyond our abilities. That's the basic message. I don't tell you what God to worship. I don't care. There's a strong resonance between what your ministry and what I believe, because there's a beautiful story that I don't have time to tell of the 6 blind Hindus with the elephant, but that's another story. Just believe in something, work on something. Give it time, give it your energy, and watch your life change. So until next week, know you are divine. Try demonstrating it. Blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.